Hi, I'm Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Candid Conversations with Darrell Fitzgerald is a show where you will learn something new. It's a show for the courageous that wants to be engaged. A show where we discuss any issues that affect the lives of people. And a show where we take inventory of our lives decisions. Welcome to Candid Conversations with Darrell Fitzgerald.
Welcome back to the show, Candid Conversations with Darrell. The show where we go in depth, we never sugarcoat, and we ask the hard questions that our viewers want to hear. On this show, we're going to have a discussion about a recent current event that happened, sort of a fiasco, as I would say, concerning a gentleman, Mr. Donald Sterling, the owner of the LA Clippers. And there's been quite a lot in the media about that. So we're just going to have a candid conversation with my guest today, Mr. Joseph Cole. I want to thank you once again, Mr. Cole, for being on the show. The Truth Hurts with Darrell.
My pleasure.
And in your opinion, what do you think about these comments? Apparently, just to inform the viewing audience, Mr. Sterling was recorded making comments that were very prejudicial, stereotypical in nature. And how do you feel about the comments and the things that were recorded by Mr. Sterling?
Well, Mr.
So not that he didn't record them, but he was recorded
as
making these statements.
Yeah, Donald Sterling is a 70-year-old Caucasian man. You know, he's seen a lot of change in the United States. So to hear things that are of a racial bias from someone of that nature isn't overly surprising in the United States. I think it just serves to show that we still have a long ways to go when it comes to racism in America, that there's still a very strong racial undertone in pretty much every aspect of American culture.
What exactly were some of his comments?
Well, he was speaking with his ex-girlfriend, and from what I can gather, he asked her not to publicize at all her relationship with any African Americans, not to bring any African Americans to any basketball games, him being the owner for the LA Clippers, and just being very, very stringent against his ex-girlfriend because she has a friendly relationship with some African American ball players. And I think it's very abysmal because he's an owner of a basketball team in a sport that is dominated by African Americans. So I find it very interesting that he finds it okay to profit off of African Americans, but in terms of allowing his girlfriend to have a friendly relationship with people that are of African descent, and him being against that, I find it very revealing of his character and of the sport in general. I mean, it makes me wonder how many owners share that same view. How many owners are just, profiting off of African Americans and their desire to become wealthy, and not really being of any benefit to African American society as a whole.
So you weren't really surprised by the prejudicial or racist comments?
Not at all.
And why weren't you surprised by those comments?
Well, this is a gentleman that came up in an era of great change. 70 years ago, it wasn't uncommon for racism to exist in America. It wasn't like it is today, where racism is kind of it's behind the curtain. It's not as blatant. So he came up in an era where Caucasian men and Caucasian women would regularly use the N-word in relation to an African American.
So you weren't upset when you heard sort of tabloids and
well,
things.
I wouldn't say I wasn't upset.
Mm-hmm.
like I said, I find it very abysmal that he can profit off of African Americans, but he's opposed to him having friends who are friends with African Americans. I'm not even talking about him being friends with African Americans, but because he has a friend who he associates with, and him being opposed to her having a friendship with an African American, I find that abysmal, and it is very upsetting to me, but it's not surprising.
Based on the recorded comments that they released to the media, he pretty much, was he upset with the fact that she brought Magic Johnson to a basketball game?
From what I can gather, he was upset that she had taken some photos with Magic Johnson and posted them on her Facebook page. I mean, it's something that's small, and
there's some personal issues involved with that, possibly. You know, kind of interesting. Whether they may be dating, or you know, there could be some issues of possibly jealousy, things of that come into play. So you know what? It's interesting. You said that you weren't upset when you heard the.
I said I wasn't surprised.
You weren't surprised,
right?
Okay.
I was upset. It is upsetting.
Okay.
It is upsetting.
Yeah, because I see a lot of people in the society right now are desensitized. You know, desensitized to some things that go on in society that deal with racism or prejudice. You know, it's almost like, you know, I mean, like if you've experienced a lot of racism in your life or a lot of prejudice in your life, you know, after a while, I mean, as you mature, you may not react
in the same manner.
To it. It's like, okay, well, you know, okay, it's just you know, I've heard this before. You know, I've been mistreated before. I've been, you know, disrespected before. You know, I've been called the N-word before. I've been discriminated from employment before. You know, I mean, I'm trying to understand how people are really affected. You know, by experiencing racism or experiencing prejudice on a day-to-day level. What is it really doing to the society? You know, when you have individuals who are relating to you a certain way, regularly, consistently, throughout the course of your growth, the course of your development. You know, I mean, I could imagine there's some people who, you know, they can't find their way. You know, or you know, the way they react or respond to this type of treatment is probably negative in of itself. You know, so that's kind of interesting. I mean, the guy, Mr. Sterling. I mean, it's not in this country. There's no law against being racist.
True.
Or being prejudiced.
True.
Do you think that the NBA was, you know, either too stringent in what they did? I mean, he was banned. I mean, I read in the papers that he was banned from the NBA. You know, so he's banned from all dealings with the NBA. You know, I don't know if they're going to prohibit him. He's probably prohibited from going to basketball games and things of that sort. Do you think that action was too stringent?
Well, I think that African Americans in today's society have, for a large extent, we have a very intellectual group of people that are African Americans. I mean, there are obviously a large amount that are also very ignorant and aren't very well educated, but there's a vast amount of African Americans that are highly educated in America today. And I think because of that, I think sponsorships and I think the intellectual African Americans, I think they forced the NBA's hand. You know, when you're talking about boycotting certain sponsors and African Americans, you know, taking that power that they have and utilizing it again, you know, I find it very encouraging. You know, I think about, you know, the work that my father did against the apartheid movement, or the work that Martin Luther King did against the bus movement, you know, and segregation in general. But what I see today, prior to this occurrence, is a somewhat of a people are almost comfortable. You know what I mean? People almost feel as though the civil rights movement ended in the 60s and the 70s. And I mean, the reality is we're still moving. You know, I think the fact that we have an African American in office has really I think it's put some African Americans to sleep in the sense that they don't feel as though we're still fighting. And then it's also woken up some Caucasians in the sense that they feel as though they have to fight, you know, that they feel as though they're losing that power. I mean, I don't know if you're aware of the Nevada rancher who has not paid his taxes for quite a long time, and the federal government was going to evict him from his property, you know, which isn't even his. He's leasing this property, and all of the Tea Party people came together and kind of supported this guy, and he came out of his mouth stating that there is no American government, that the American government is dissolved. And I don't think he would have said that if George Bush was in office or if Mitt Romney was in office. I think it's a direct affront to the fact that we have an African American in office, and these people who are from this era of hatred and prejudice and racism, they don't know how to adjust to a new society, you know. And I think things like this, when we have an opportunity to voice our dissent for these types of actions, and we take that opportunity, I think it gives us an opportunity as a people, as an American society, to really move ahead and really fight against this type of ignorant thinking where we're basing our judgment on somebody based on their race, their skin color.
So would you say that the NBA, in making that decision to ban Mr. Sterling from the NBA, was doing the right thing, sending the right message?
I think,
to
again,
society?
I think we forced their hand, and I think it was absolutely the correct approach.
Would you say it was primarily a business move?
It was
because
definitely
it was going to hurt the institution
absolutely.
of the NBA in terms
absolutely.
of corporate sponsorships.
It wasn't, you know, a social, you know, the NBA is going to fight for civil rights for African Americans. No. You know, the NBA was going to lose a lot of money. You know, we were pulling sponsors left and right. People were going to start boycotting games. The LA Clippers were going to have a hard time recruiting people, you know, even retaining the people that they already have in their organization. You know, but at the end of the day, this gentleman bought the team for less than $20 million. He'll sell it for about $500 million.
Yeah, so he's probably going to make a profit.
He's going to make a huge profit.
Losing the team, he'll make a big profit.
Absolutely.
Do you think that a person should have the right to be able to say whatever they want to say in their household, in their home?
Well, sure, I do believe that an individual should be free to express their own opinions. However, I also believe that an individual should be willing to face the consequences of their opinions. You know, if you're afraid of what you say behind closed doors being public, I mean, perhaps you shouldn't say it. You know, like if you're really afraid of the opinions of others because of what you have to say, then perhaps you shouldn't say it. You know, maybe you should self-reflect and find a different approach. Maybe, you know, like me personally, I feel as though if you have a if you feel as though you are right, it shouldn't matter what anybody says.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you should be willing to say whatever it is that you have to say publicly. You know what I mean? I don't feel as though we should necessarily censor ourselves when it comes to stating anything. You know what I mean?
But like within the privacy of your own home, you know, I would tend to think that you would feel comfortable being able to say whatever you want to say.
Absolutely.
You know? And without feeling as if there are some people who look at this and they say that this guy was set up, that Mr. Sterling was actually set up. I mean, we have recordings that were made by his ex-girlfriend between conversations with him and her.
Sure.
Probably in a private domain,
Sure.
maybe some in a public domain, but in a private domain. So you have these recordings that were made, and let's say you were Mr. Sterling, and you're making these comments in the comfort of your own home. And someone's recording you, and then taking those recordings and leaking those recordings to the public. I mean, I would do you think that that's an act of integrity?
I would definitely feel a sense of betrayal, you know, from my so-called friend doing this. You know, I definitely feel as though, you know, that's not showing a sense of loyalty. But again, you know, if you're the owner of a basketball team, you know, and you're a billionaire, you know, and you need to be cognizant of the fact that things like this are going to happen. You know, you are a public figure. You know, like President Obama could never say, even in the privacy of his own home, a racial epithet to that manner, and even in earshot of one of his staff members, because it would be leaked. just as readily.
Right,
you know
right.
what I mean? When you're a public figure like this, your privacy tends to be extremely limited, and that's just the arena that you're playing in, and you need to be cognizant of that. You know, I mean, people will always look for an opportunity to profit off of you.
Right.
You know, and she definitely found that opportunity in his ignorance, you know, and in his lack of clear understanding of people.
Would you say that most people are prejudiced, or all people are prejudiced?
I think people can be prejudiced to an extent. You know, you might see a bum on the street and make a prejudicial thought in your head about why he's there. You know what I mean? I think everybody battles. If you're a positive individual, such as I am, you know, we all battle with, you know, these prejudicial thoughts that we may have about somebody. You know, but I think the difference between somebody who is a racist and somebody who may have prejudicial thoughts that randomly move through their head is that the racist promotes those thoughts, and the racist, you know, feeds those thoughts and constantly is continually thinking those thoughts, whereas the average person who isn't prejudicial blatantly but may have these random thoughts will tend to battle those thoughts and try to have other types of thoughts of love and connection, you know, and social justice.
Have you ever made a prejudice statement toward, let's say, another race or another culture in the privacy of your own home? Have you ever done that before?
I wouldn't say I've made any prejudicial statements. No, I mean, like for me, I mean, my mother was a Caucasian, you know, my father's an African American. So, I mean, for me, you know, I was always brought up, you know, with a genuine sense of camaraderie with everybody. You know, I have cousins all across the world, people in New Zealand, people in Italy, people in Africa, people in Texas.
How do you feel when you either see someone acting prejudiced toward another person?
I feel sorry for that individual because I feel as though they're
you feel sorry for the perpetrator, the person who was actually communicating or acting in a way that's prejudiced?
Absolutely, because hatred, as we've stated in the past, hatred begets hatred. You know, the law of reciprocity won't allow for somebody like that to be prosperous in the long run. You know, even if, you know, maybe monetarily you might have wealth, inside you there's a certain misery, there's a certain lack of love, and I think any time that you allow these dark and heinous thoughts to fill your being, I think that you're doing yourself a disservice.
So what's the hope for a person who's prejudiced or a racist? Is there anything that you can do to help somebody who's prejudiced or racist?
I think there's very little that you can do to help anybody.
So how do they change?
And mental, when it comes to who an individual is, there's nothing that you can tell anybody to change somebody. I think the only way that any individual will ever change is through self-reflection. You know.
So once a racist, always a racist.
No,
once a person who's prejudiced,
I'm not
always
saying
a
that.
prejudiced.
I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that that person will be a racist until he decides that that is no longer the best in his best interest, or that it is no longer, you know, conducive to an overall good society, or that it is no longer a true way of thinking. You know, like if you're basing your racism on the intellectual prowess of a people, or if you're basing your racism on the social ramifications of a culture, you know, I think then I think you have limited your exposure to a certain race or to a certain culture. And so until you allow yourself to see the other side of that culture or that race, you will continue to be a racist. But I think at the end of the day, that individual has to have a moment of self-reflection and a moment of, you know, really looking at what it is that he feels about this race that makes them inferior to his own.
So you think exposure and interaction with other people other than or a person's individual race helps in that process of influencing a person who is racist or has a lot of prejudice?
Yeah, I think so. I think, but I think only if it's done in the right manner. You know, that individual has to seek it. You know, it can't be, okay, Donald Sterling, let's do a group session with some African Americans and desensitize you to your racism. No, that'll only just raise his, you know, and he may even front as though, I mean, he's giving contributions to the NAACP, and even the NAACP has stated that they would consider accepting an apology from him and affirming his, giving him awards, because they were going to give this man an award, the NAACP, for his work in the NBA, and they had withdrawn that offer until he made a financial contribution to them. So again, I mean, we can force their hand, but it won't be genuine. You know what I mean? Whereas if that individual has a moment of self-reflection and really determines that he's going to try to find the best in anybody, then at that moment he may have an opportunity to change.
I hear you. We're running out of time, but I really do appreciate your views and your thoughts about this topic. And I look forward to talking with you again sometime in the future. Maybe go into more depth about our discussions of racism and prejudice in this country. Just want to thank the viewing audience for tuning in to another episode of Candid Conversations with Darrell. Thank you for continually watching the show, and we look forward to talking with you in the near future.